I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, good God Almighty, and make it plain. Make it plain upon tables, that he may run. Somebody say run. That readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, tell your neighbor, wait for it, because it will surely come, and it will not tarry. For a few moments, brothers and sisters, I would that you all would pray with me. I want to pose this question to you. What happened to the dream? On your way to your seat, ask your neighbor, what happened to the dream? In the year 1983, then President Ronald Reagan signed into law a federal holiday that would commemorate the life and the legacy of one Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Although it was not observed until 1986, this holiday would eventually be recognized as an occasion to remember his service and his sacrifice. There are many, and I would agree, that would describe Dr. King as a drum major for justice. But aside from his commitment and his personal commitment to the plight of his people, I would dare say that this man was a prophet for modern times. Again, I say he was a prophet for modern times, for such a time as this. By definition, a prophet is one who speaks on behalf of God to the nation, to the government, and generations to come. Would you agree with that? Again, I say a prophet is one who speaks on behalf of God to nations, to governments, and to future generations. And part of what we call prophecy is forthtelling. Forthtelling, that is the interpretation of events that are happening right now. In other words, what's going on right now? How do we make sense of our current condition? But then on the other hand, aside from forthtelling, there is also an element of prophecy called foretelling. That is the prediction of the future seen through the eyes of faith. Are y'all with me so far? You have forthtelling, and then you have foretelling. And in the words of our text, we find the prophet Habakkuk speaking to the people on behalf of God. In order for Habakkuk to communicate this message, it was first necessary for him to be in the right position. Somebody say the right position, the right position. See, he says in verse 1, I will stand upon my watch and set me up upon a tower, and will watch to see what God, what the Lord will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. It's a whole lot in there. He says, I got to get in the right position. I've got to get in the right posture. But the third element of prophecy, other than just foretelling, what we see from Habakkuk is the reproof of God, which also means that there's got to be some correction in prophecy. I need this generation to understand that prophecy is not just about telling you your blessing is on the way. Prophecy is not just telling you that you got some money coming. Prophecy is not just to talk about the healing of your body. No, according to Habakkuk, prophecy is the conviction that comes from God, letting you know where you are and where you need to be. And so if you allow me just a few moments, I want to make an attempt to do a scholarly comparison between the prophet Habakkuk and the preacher, Dr. King. Y'all do know he was a preacher. Folk like to call him Dr. King, but before he was Dr. King, he was Reverend King. Wish I had some help here. Before he was Reverend King, he was Pastor King. Remember, he was a minister long before he was a marcher. I submit that there was somewhat of a prophetic proclivity, if you will, in the work of Dr. King. And the only evidence you really need of that fact is in the last two speeches that he is most remembered for. The March on Washington, the speech that he gave, I Have a Dream, he's most remembered for that. But then on April 3rd, 1968, the speech that he gave said, I've been to the mountaintop, I've seen my way over. I may not get there with you, but I've seen the promised land, and after a while, if we hold on, we will get there. He's most remembered for those two speeches, and so I need to make a comparison between the prophet Habakkuk and the prophet King. When they marched 50 years ago in Washington, D.C., he gave us a vision of a hopeful future. So I've looked at the transcript and the manuscript of that speech. One day I'm going to have to let Minister Burks present to you all, because he has memorized and can actually recite the entire I Have a Dream speech verbatim. Y'all have to hear that one day. But I looked at the manuscript and I asked Dr. King, I said, Dr. King, what do you see? He said, I have a dream. I have a vision. I have what we talked about last week. I have sight beyond sight. Have I got a witness here? He says that I see some things, but in order for you to understand my dream, Dr. King told me you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. I need every young person in here to hear what I'm saying this morning. You cannot know where you are going unless you have first acknowledged where you have already been. Somebody was here before you got here. There was a church before you got here. There was an institution before you got here. There was a college before you got there. Remember where you're going, but acknowledge where you've been. Dr. King said, 50 years. That's 100 years, y'all. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed a document called the Emancipation Proclamation. He says this monument and this momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. He's talking about our past. He says it came as a joyous daybreak to the end of the long night of their captivity. But he says, here we are 100 years later, and we find that the Negro is still not free. He's talking about the present. He says 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, he's talking about now. The Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. I wish I had some help here. He says 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and still finds himself in exile in his own land. The prophet King said that we've come here today to dramatize what we all should see as a shameful condition. In a sense, Dr. King says we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. Because when the architects of the Republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American should be an heir to. Yeah, this note was a promise that all men, he says, yes, black men and white men would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I wish I had a history student here. That's what Charles said to us. But King said, when I look at the condition we're in today, it is obvious that America has defaulted on its promise in so much as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro a bad check because it is marked insufficient funds. I'm only saying what the prophet said. Y'all need to loosen up in here. He says we refuse to believe that the bank of justice is bankrupt. He said we refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity in this nation. And so we've come to Washington, D.C. to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and security of justice. I believe he was preaching then. We've come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. Somebody shout now. Yeah. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take tranquilizing drugs of gradualism. No, this is the time right now to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children. Preach, King. And so what you saw was prophetic forthtelling. It was a clear and concise criticism of where we were versus where we needed to be. And yet, in the spirit of the prophet, he begins to foretell what a future ought to look like. He says, I have a dream that one day all of us can sit together at the table of brotherhood. He says, I have a dream. I have a vision. I have seen it. A nation where people will be judged strictly by the content of their character alone. I have a dream that people can work wherever their skill set will take them, where they can live wherever their money can afford them, go to school wherever their grades allow them, and live in a place where they are seen as equals. I'm sure by now you've all heard the speech rehearsed, so I don't have to read the whole thing to you, but there is a direct parallel between the prophet and the preacher. Because in those speeches and in his ministry, he laid out a vision for all of us to follow. Write the vision and make it plain upon tables, so that when the people of God hear it, they will run and make it a reality. Well, brothers and sisters, when I observe the last 50 years, when I look at the condition of our community, the question that begs to be answered this morning is, what happened to the dream? What happened to the dream? I'm not trying to be critical, but like Habakkuk and like Dr. King, I got to be honest about what I see. I gave you a chance to shout before the sermon because you may not like me much during this sermon. Because it's one thing to tell a white man how he ought to treat black folk, but it's another type of prophet altogether when you can tell black folk what they're doing to themselves. If you want to know what happened to the dream, The short answer is we stopped running after it. Habakkuk said, write the vision, make it plain, so that when they read it, they won't just read it, they'll run after it. But what has happened since the years since Dr. King gave his speech, the fact is we know how to read, but we don't know how to run. What are you saying, Pastor Simmons? I'm saying that we didn't lose the dream, we lost our drive. Talk back to me here. We didn't lose the vision, we lost our vigor and our vigilance to go after the vision. And in lieu of all the progress that we have made, listen to me, this is the best thing. You need to tweet it, you need to write it, you need to text it, you better remember what I'm saying. Our problem is not access, our problem is attitude. Come in. Well, we went from the back of the bus to driving the bus. That's access. We went from the outhouse to the White House. That's access. We went from no right to vote to electing the first black president and re-elected the joker right behind it. That is access. We got access to the finest schools. We got access to the finest neighborhoods. We can live where we want, wear what we want, drive what we want, sit where we want, wherever our skills will take us. All of that is access and progress. Don't get me wrong, I thank God for access. I thank God for progress. But in the midst of that access, some of us have developed a complacent attitude. Now that we can eat with them, now that we can live in the same neighborhood as them, I wish y'all wouldn't be scared to say amen this morning. Now that we can go to school with them, now that we can play on the same team as them, now that we can raise our children around them, we took for granted that the work was done, not realizing our obligation to run and keep it going. I'm gonna help you, because the issue for many of us is not access, it's attitude. That attitude of entitlement. As if somehow the world owes you something just because you want it. This attitude of entitlement, as if we don't have to work for everything. Need I remind you that everything our ancestors got, they fought for it, they sat in for it, they marched for it, they were hung for it, they were lynched for it, they were raped for it, they bled for it, they gave their lives for it. So how dare you be on a college campus wasting time and energy? How dare you fail any class? How dare you drop out? How dare you give up? How dare you start tripping because somebody don't like you? Hell, they have not lynched you. They don't like me, so they subtweeting me. Who cares? If they didn't nail you to a cross, if they didn't hang you from a tree, tell your neighbor, build a bridge and get over it. We've gotten complacent. And we are satisfied. I wasn't supposed to do all this right now. We have gotten satisfied with what I call the appearance of success. This finna mess you up, because it messed me up when the Lord said it. Look at how the economy is set up. You shouting because you got access. You shouting because you got the appearance of success. But if you really look at it, most of us are still in bondage. I'm finna help you. We think we have arrived because a black man can make $1 million a year in athletics, in salaries, and in endorsements. Us done made it now, right? Well, riddle me this. Aside from Michael Jordan,
Magic Johnson, and Jay-Z, how many black folk own a professional franchise?
Michael Jordan is mostly owner of the Charlotte Bobcats. Magic Johnson owns the baseball Dodgers in Los Angeles. And Jay-Z owns part of the Brooklyn Nets. Other than those three colored people, how many Negroes own a team? But you shouting because they got a sneaker deal. Forget about sneakers. How many of them own a stadium? That's where the money is. That's where the deals are made. That's where the city governments get involved. Because if you can bring a stadium, you can bring revenue. If you can bring revenue, you can give folk jobs. We talking about we happy because we got a sneaker deal. You don't own nothing. It gets deeper. These ridiculous reality shows that are all over the television. How many people of color other than Oprah own their own network? Don't say BET, because BET sold out to Viacom. Viacom is not a black company. Do your homework before you try to answer me when I'm preaching. They will let you produce as long as you make a buffoon out of yourself. They'll let you have the executive producer of the Basketball Wives, but the owner of the station sit back and laugh at you ignorant heifers because y'all are paying them for you to be a fool. Write me a letter. No matter of fact, I ain't gonna even read it. Don't worry about writing me no letter. I don't read hate mail. You happy because Denzel, Jamie Foxx, Hallelujah Berry, and Sister Monique. You happy because those four people got an Oscar. But how many people besides Tyler Perry own their own movie studio? Paramount, that's not us. Columbia, that's not us. Disney, Pixar, that's not us. Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, ain't none of that us. You can star in their movies, but you don't own the material. Ask your neighbor, what happened to the dream? It gets deeper. What happened to the vision of not only access, but hard-working attitude? Y'all got to stop being happy about what you think is the appearance of success. Stop getting a little bit of money and going to blow it, trying to look like you got something. Your rims can't keep your lights on. Your phone can't put you through college. Your clothes can't give you nothing in this life. You better learn how to invest what you have. Stop being a consumer and start being a producer. Why is it that when we get some money, the first place we put it is around our neck, in our mouth, and on our tires? They spinning, Reverend. They spinning. I know I'm preaching. Y'all may as well get off me today. Listen. I'm almost finished. Listen, as much as I love Dr. King and his vision, the vision that Malcolm X had wasn't too shabby either. I know I'm a Baptist preacher, but I got some Malcolm in me. Because while King was talking about merging with them, Malcolm said, forget them, let's build our own. We can build our own businesses, our own neighborhoods, our own schools, our own banks, our own hospitals, our own grocery store. Martin was talking about blending. Malcolm was talking about building. So if you ask me how I feel, I don't say either or, I say both and. Because the vision that God has given for us is bigger than any one individual. I'm going to help you understand this. This is probably going to solve 100 years worth of issues in the black community. That's why the ball has been dropped since the I Have a Dream speech. That's why the ball has been dropped since April 4th, 1968. And we thought it was going to get picked up on November 6, 2008 when Barack got elected. Listen, we've been looking for one man to do what we should be doing. That's where your Jesse Jacksons come in. Because we've been looking for one man. That's where your Al Sharptons, your Tavis Smileys, your Cornel West, your Michael Eric Dyson, your Steve Harvey, Michael Basin. That's where your sister Oprah and Iyanla come from, because we've been looking for somebody to take the lead. That was our mistake, ladies and gentlemen. Because the movement was not meant to be sustained by one person. Let me tell you how I know. And you may have never looked at it this way, but let me tell you how I know. The diversity we have in the world now, and the diversity that we have in the black community, there ain't one black person that can get all Negroes to work together. Y'all ain't feeling me here. There ain't one man on this planet that can get all of us at every level to work together. It was easier back in the 50s and 60s because we were all in the same boat. None of us had rights, so we were in the same boat. None of us could vote. None of us could eat at Denny's. None of us could sit in the front. None of us could run the company. None of us could play ball for FSU. So as long as we were in the same boat, we could follow behind one man because we were all in the same boat. But now that some of us have arrived, now that some of us no longer have to drink out of, you understand, the water hose. Now that many of us have distilled and filtered water, now that many of us now are able to live behind gated communities, now that a lot of us have letters behind our names, now we don't have to see the ghetto. We can go around the ghetto. Now we don't have to deal with people who don't start on time and people who are always loud in the movie theaters. Now we've arrived to the point where can't one black person lead us because Negroes are on different levels. You got bougie, you got ghetto, and then you have bougetto. Some of you who try to act like you ain't from the ghetto, trying to act like you ain't country, trying to act like you a little sophisticated. There's somebody out there, no poogie. You up there at Shula's trying to eat a $50 steak. Hey there, Nene. Up there at Southwood trying to play golf and act like don't nobody know. Tyrone, ain't that you, boy? When you start playing golf, Tyrone? Tell your neighbor, somebody know your name. And the reason why we can't rely on just one leader is because too many of our leaders are on the world's payroll. There ain't but so much they gonna say because they are prophets for profit. It gets deeper. How else can you explain a preacher standing up for gay rights? How else can you explain a preacher standing up for abortion rights? It's because he's on MSNBC's payroll. What else is he going to say? The liberal station cuts his check. The liberal media is the one that's funding his program. How dare they say that Dr. King would have fought for the gay agenda? It's because the heads of these radio stations are gay and lesbian themselves. So of course the DJs are saying that. Of course the commentators are saying that. I don't know what Dr. King would or would not have said, but I know my Bible has not changed whether Dr. King says it or not. God wrote that sin is still sin. God wrote that murder is still murder. And the prophets we have today, they are focused on dollars instead of doctrine. It gets heavier. I ain't even through. That's why I'm not too quick to jump on some of these political bandwagons. Because black people suffer from what I call momentary outrage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a term. It's a proper term to be applied to the Negro species. I said momentary outrage. When Trayvon Martin was killed, we rallied and we marched, and rightfully so. But since then, here's a question: has violence gone down in our community? Have we stopped fighting each other in the streets? Have black men stopped killing each other? Have black women stopped slapping each other on TV? Don't you know that boy didn't die just so you can wear a hoodie? Looking like you care. That boy didn't die just so you can post your little deep thoughts on Twitter trying to sound deep as if you care. No, his death should have been a siren. His death should have been an alarm clock that will wake us up. But it takes little white kids to get shot at school. Now we got to do something about guns. Black people get killed on the streets each and every day. Talk to somebody in Chicago. Talk to somebody in Los Angeles. Talk to people in Detroit. Talk to people in Newark, New Jersey. This stuff ain't just started happening, but it takes little Amy to get killed. Now we gotta do something. Momentary outrage. Not only that, I'm coming closer. All these years, people been getting bullied and beat on these college campuses. Getting beat into these organizations. But it takes somebody getting killed. Now we gotta stop hazing. Momentary outrage. These fraternities and sororities still whooping people's behinds today. All this pre-hazing, all these making these boys and girls do stupid stuff just to get in your organization, making them go get you lunch, making them wash your car. They scared to come to church because of how you looking at them in the pew. I wish I would hear about somebody being pre-hazed in my church. I wish I would have somebody say that they tried to talk to you and you wouldn't speak to them because you heard they was trying to be an AKA. I wish I would hear about somebody being mistreated. All this stuff going on in the world, and Negroes still mistreating each other. You don't like what I'm saying, and I don't really care much. Because folk out there dying, and we still playing these psychological games with people. It's time out for momentary outrage. It's time out for us being upset about something, march for about a week and a half, and then we back to business as usual. So when you ask me, what happened to the dream? The answer is you and I stopped running.